Hi, I'm Amy, the Senior Conservator at the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery, and I'll be talking about the care of some photographic materials. There are a number of types of common damage that different photographic materials experience. These range from tears, losses, cracking of glass plates, lifting of emulsion, scratches, fading, discoloration and colour shifting. In order to inhibit these types of damage, there are a number of steps that can be taken to care for photographic materials. One of the most important things is handling. In terms of assistance in handling, make sure that things are flat and supported so that you don't cause any sort of folding or tears or breakages. It is also important to have clean hands, or particularly dealing with photographic prints, if possible wear nitrile gloves so that you don't touch the emulsion and cause fingerprint damage. It's also beneficial to keep photographs in a stable environment if possible, and this is looking at the light levels, relative humidity and temperature. As mentioned, the type of environment is very important. Photographs are particularly susceptible to light damage. So what we prefer to do is keep things in storage in the dark if possible. Light damage is actually cumulative, so each time you expose a photograph to light, it will be adding to the age and deterioration that is likely of the photograph. When you look at light levels, you're looking at direct sunlight, UV, which is the most damaging to photographs, also illumination within rooms, so household lamps and lights, LEDs, that sort of thing. So if possible, we like to minimise the amount of light exposure, and as mentioned, you can do that by keeping things in the dark, but also the amount of illumination that you subject your photographic materials to. Low-level LEDs are now being used in a lot of museums and art galleries, and also the duration of the time that you subject them to the light. So for particularly old photographic material types that may be sensitive, such as daguerreotypes, through to colour photography, you may want to only expose it to light or keep it on display for up to 3 months if possible. Other areas, environmental control, look at the relative humidity and the temperature within a room. Within museums and art galleries, we control our storage spaces using air conditioning systems, HVAC systems, and we try to keep things as stable as possible. Within a home environment, obviously you may not be able to control it to the exact temperature and relative humidity levels that you want. So if you try to keep it stable, you are benefiting the preservation of the photographic material. What you can do is put dehumidifiers in a room if it is particularly damp, especially if you have a house that may leak or the like. And you can use home air conditioning or heating systems. Just try not to ensure that the levels are fluctuating too rapidly. We prefer levels to be going like a slow wave. If you do have very high relative humidity, of course it can cause things like mould outbreaks or other biological deterioration. It can also be a catalyst for chemical change. A lot of photographs do have an inherent vice due to how they are processed, and the chemicals that are within them, if they haven't been removed properly, can cause deterioration. And high relative humidity will act as a catalyst for this. Temperature also works with the relative humidity. So basically, if you can try and keep that stable as well, usually we try to aim around 20 degrees, if possible, within a display environment. If you are keeping it in a colder cupboard or shelving or the like, then that is actually beneficial for photographs, as those types of materials don't mind being cooler in comparison to other object types. If you're wanting to display your photographs at home, it is important to consider, as I mentioned, the light levels that you're exposing it to. There are a number of ways that you can display your photographs, such as mounting them. We tend to use archival materials to mount, and these can then be put into frames. There are a number of different methods that you can use for mounting, but as long as they're kept safe within the mount, then you're providing an encapsulate within the frame. We have a matte board at the front so that the photograph is not touching directly to the glass or perspex, whatever the glazing may be, and that creates a bit of airflow. As you may see with some of your frames at home, the photograph sticks to the glass, so you want to try and avoid that if possible by having the small spacer there. And also within the frame, you have an enclosure that creates a microenvironment where we're actually having a more stable relative humidity and temperature than the outside of the frame. Try to minimise the light exposure that you're subjecting to original materials. If you have something that is particularly important to you, then you can possibly digitise it and display the copy and then keep the original in dark storage so that you're not destroying the original valuable item. Within your home environment, to reduce the light levels where you're displaying your photographs, you may think about what blinds you have on windows to minimise the UV light that is coming into the room. Preserving your photographs is particularly important in terms of storage. What we try to think of is a Russian doll effect within the household or repository or storeroom. So firstly, you're thinking of the enclosure or the encapsulate that the photograph is actually kept in. And there are a number of things that you can purchase either from archival specialists or from stationery stores, or you can make your own. So firstly, we have things like mylar pockets, which is made of polyester, a very stable plastic and good for photographic materials. This particular photograph is mounted, and you can see that there is damage on the back due to the acidic mount board. So keeping it within this encapsulate will stop the environment entering, and it provides assistance for handling. You can also get a range of materials that are specific for photographs, and these include polypropylene sleeves. There are a number of different types that are specific to different photographic prints, so they come in different sizes, as well as to house your negatives and transparencies. These sleeves can then be kept in a number of formats, such as folders, which can be purchased, and these are also made of polypropylene, which is very stable, and then the materials can just be stacked in there. Or otherwise you can purchase portfolios or folders which have a slipcase and a ring binder style so that the sleeves can easily be flipped through. Polypropylene is very stable for photographs, and it's been passed by the photographic activity test, which in Australia is done by the National Archives of Australia. As mentioned, you can also use polyester, which is often referred to as mylar, which is a brand, but photographs can also be kept in polyethylene. Polyethylene is readily available from places like stationery stores. The display folders that just have plain plastic sleeves are often these days made of polyethylene, so that is a cheaper alternative if you want to store your photographs. If you have things like glass plate negatives, you can buy small polypropylene folders, and then within there you can stack the glass plates. It is important not to keep the actual plates face to face because the emulsions can rub against each other, which may cause abrasion. Also, they may break if they're knocking against each other, as glass is very sensitive. So what we try to do is house things separately in 4 flat folders. This is easy then to access the negative and it keeps it safe from rubbing against each other when in the enclosure. If you don't have money or time to buy proper archival materials, you can use other boxes and things around the house. But it is important to note that things should be padded or supported within their enclosure. So this is an example of some lantern slides which have just been padded out with some foam, and they have small dividers which are made of cardboard. As you can see, the little slides look like they're sitting against each other, but small pieces of tissue have been cut to interleave within. So again, we're not causing any abrasion or scratching of the surface. If you have photographic albums, these can be stored on shelves as is on open display, or you can make custom-made boxes. We use archival card, which is acid-free, and there are a number of plans and instructions online that can be sourced from a range of institutions such as the National Archives on how to make these. This particular folder, again, is a 4-flap style, and it's referred to as a phase box, and the album is kept tightly within there and supported, which can then be put on a shelf either flat or be kept like a book on a bookshelf. In terms of storing negatives, you may have lots of these lying around the house. Quite often people have kept these with a rubber band around the middle. It's very important to ensure that you take that off. Firstly, the rubber will deteriorate, and this causes an off-gassing, which can cause deterioration of the negatives from the sulphur, but also you will get indentations on your negatives, which can then cause issues if you want to digitise and print them later. Also, don't use clips or anything of that sort. A lot of these are found in different types of plastics, and old negatives are most probably in things like PVC, which is not good for photographic materials. The polyvinyl chloride will deteriorate, off-gas and yellow. So if possible, it is preferable to take them out of these sorts of enclosures and use the plastic slips that I showed you earlier. When looking at different types of colour photography, we know that there are many, many different formats, and they've come in different shapes and sizes. So they've come with rounded corners, small squares, etc., through to earlier photographs which may be hand coloured, or earlier types that may have processing issues. When looking at all of these within your collection, it is preferable to keep them in the plastic sleeves if possible, but if you don't have the ability to do that and want to keep them in boxes, just be mindful that if you're stacking them on top of each other or putting them on their edge within a box, you can possibly still have issues like abrasion as the back of the photographic print rubs the front of another. You can interleave with tissue if you have the ability to do so. Another type of damage that's often seen is indentations on the photograph from ink and biros, where people have written words on the photograph. So that's just another thing to be wary of and not to do. Colour photography is quite interesting in terms of the rates of deterioration. There have been many, many different types since its inception, and the very early types will quite often have issues of colour shifting. You'll often see this on photographs from around the 70s. The prints may look blue or may look pink, and that is because the colour has changed within the chemical process. You may also have colour photographs that all look the same within your collection, but there is a difference between this photograph and this photograph, in that this was shot on film and then processed in the old analogue manner. These days we're shooting digitally, and we may go to the store and get them printed digitally. One way you can have a look to see what type of print it is by looking at the back to see if it has any information on. Quite often you may have information about the type of paper that it's printed on. with the digital prints, quite often it will say something of the sort of digital, or you may have something that is blank, or this one here is a computer brand. So that's a good clue that it is from a digital print. And these are more susceptible to fading and staining than a lot of the stable colour photography. So if possible, try to minimise the light exposure to these, or ensure that you have the digital file so that you can reprint if for some reason it becomes damaged. When looking at black and white photography, of course, there are many different formats. So the early formats were small, like these, through to the more contemporary, which is black and white film and processed with black and white, through to digital prints which look black and white. However, these are actually colour printing materials which are mimicking black and white. So when looking at black and white photographs, if you can identify that it is actually a colour print to look black and white, follow the same recommendations as preserving colour prints by minimising the light. Traditional black and white photography is actually more stable. In terms of older photographs, you may have things like an iridescence visible, silver mirroring, which occurs from the silver gelatin prints. It's beneficial or preferable not to clean this off. Sometimes it can actually obstruct an image. However, do not try and clean the silver mirroring off yourself. It's preferable to send it to a conservator who can do it professionally, because as you're removing that, you're actually removing silver from the photograph and you may cause damage. So if possible, send it to a conservator. When talking about the Russian doll effect, I mentioned the different types of enclosures that can be used. So this may be seen as the smallest doll. Then beyond that, we look at the shelving or area that you are storing your photograph. Things like unsealed wood on shelving potentially can cause off-gassing, which can then cause deterioration of photographs. So if possible, try and keep them in cupboards or on metal shelving, which is coated. Just something else to think about. Then from the shelving, we look at the actual room or building that the photographs are being stored in. So we want something that's stable, that's leak-proof, so we don't have any disasters. We're also maintaining the temperature and relative humidity by keeping it in a stable environment, looking at security so that nothing is stolen or vandalised. So that's the Russian doll effect, as in smaller doll through to the larger doll.